Hydrogen's a challenge because as an energy vector, it's in almost every sector. It's in large industry, it's in paper making, it's in board making, it's in every form of transport and logistics. We put it into the natural gas, we're using it in maritime, and we're using it in our homes. So the challenge of introducing this new fuel is extraordinary. I'm old enough to remember the transition from town gas, and by the way, town gas was in effect hydrogen to natural gas back in the 70s, where we had a conversion programme across all the homes in the UK. And ironically now we're probably going back to that gas at some point, back to hydrogen. So transition is a dynamic thing, and we're in that transition period, and we need the skills at every level, and we'll talk about the levels of skills a little bit today to develop that. So first of all, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. Carl, thank you for your introductory presentation. I should just, Sam, are you happy just to introduce yourself for 5 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Everyone hear me okay? Thank you. So Sam Deloy-Davies, I'm from the Strategic Development Network. Really pleased to be here with you all. We work closely with government, with business, and with education providers, so we're kind of there in the middle, understanding what's needed, understanding what's happening. We're very involved in the changes and reforms around apprenticeships, around T-levels, and I'll be asking you guys a bit about your knowledge of those things in a little bit, around things like higher technical qualifications. So I can talk a little bit about what I know is already happening and a bit about the needs of where the education sector needs to go to help business.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, Yvonne can't be with us today, so we're joined by a colleague from the college. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon everyone. I'm Sean Hindle. I'm the Exec Director for Barking and Dagenham College. Really pleased to be here this afternoon to talk to you around what the college is offering in terms of the skills and driving the skills for the region forward. As a college, we offer everything from level 1 right up to degree level programs across most sector areas, and we collaborate quite widely with a number of people, and I see a few of you in the audience already. So we are very much a collaborative organisation. We can't deliver the skills without your support. My remit is very much around upskilling and reskilling the workforce, getting people into jobs and making sure that we equip the young people that's coming out of schools now going into the right industries moving forward. I'll address that a bit later on.
Thank you. Oliver, please introduce yourself.
I'm Oliver Koenig. I'm an associate professor at Coventry University, where I lead the hydrogen energy research team. Our research at Coventry focuses on both fuel cell propulsion systems, where we work at relatively high TRL, so between sort of 3 and 7 or 8. So looking to improve the efficiency and durability of fuel cell systems for multi-power applications. And then also on green hydrogen production, where we're working on next generation electrolyzer technologies with improved efficiency, lower cost, longer lifetime, ultimately the aim being to reduce the cost of green hydrogen. And alongside the research, we're increasingly often receiving requests from our industrial partners and collaborators for bespoke programs of training to upskill their existing staff to allow them to sort of work more effectively in the hydrogen space. So that's something that we're developing sort of taught offerings towards at the moment.
James, afternoon.
Hi, doing everyone. I'm James Robinson. I'm a lecturer at UCL, based in Bloomsbury at the moment, but as some of you may know, over the next year or so, UCL is actually expanding into the Thames Estuary region. So as part of the expansion process, we're taking 2 buildings right beside the Olympic Stadium, which I'll be based in. In my current guise in Bloomsbury, I'm part of Europe's largest electrochemical research group. So we have over 100 PhD and postdoctoral researchers focusing on hydrogen production, utilisation, and also batteries and other electrochemical technologies. And with a separate hat, I'm also heavily involved in the kind of training programs for PhD and postdoctoral researchers for the Faraday Institution, which is the UK's sort of battery research funding agency.
Thank you everyone. So skills at all different levels, I think that's what we need. I'm conscious that we're an all-male panel, and when I look around the room, we're predominantly male, yet our student community, certainly at our university, and I'm sure it's true at yours, are more than 50% female. How are we going to get the diversity into the industry? Why have we got this challenge over diversity? Would you like to start that one?
Yeah, to be honest, it's It's a good question, and it's taking some thinking about. But I think it starts in schools. I think.
Right.
I've got a 17-year-old son. I know I don't look old enough, but hey. And that careers advice is not there. People do not understand what's available to them as an occupation for the future. And it's about, I think the days are gone where, you're a boy.
Yeah. I'm waiting for that.
I might come down. Can you hear me okay? No? Can you hear me now?
Not to my acoustics.
Live now, yeah? Excellent.
Thank you. Sorry about that, team.
So yeah, just to start again, I think it starts in schools with
Yeah.
careers advice.
Yeah.
It's really important that advice is given to all children from all demographics, male, female, etc., etc. And it's about getting the right people into the right jobs. So it's, if you look at careers advice years ago, you're a 15-year-old boy, you've got grade C's or expected grade C's, you can go and be a plant mechanic. That's not anything negative to plant mechanics. And, so I think it's changing that perception and that engagement at a really early age.
Okay. Any other observations from the panel in terms of that? James, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I can maybe, comment reflecting that we are an all-male panel, so it's probably a slightly skewed perspective. But I think one of the really important aspects around this is that we tend, as universities, we tend to meet undergraduates, master's graduates, PhD graduates at key intervention stages in their life. So we tend to get them at 17 years old when they're deciding, do I want to go to university, and therefore incur a debt that's associated with university, or do I want to go out into the workplace or start my own company and things like that. I think we need to do a much better job of displaying the benefits of getting that degree, getting that master's program, getting that PhD, and showcasing the routes that those qualifications open. Now, I think some of the traditional ways of doing that have been around, getting role models up there, but I think we also need to do a much better job of supporting those role models, because I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to be the person who's always asked to talk about the EDI issue because I'm that person with the EDI issue. So we need to be really good at supporting those and giving the people who actually want to engage with that, we need to give them the space to be able to do so and the support to be able to do so as well. The other thing I think that's really important, and it's a very difficult thing to do, but there needs to be sort of institutional self-reflection. It's very, very hard to look and say things are problematic in what we're doing. But this old analogy of the leaky pipeline where, if we put enough people in, eventually enough people will come out, doesn't work.
No.
Because what that's doing is ignoring the fact that there's systemic barriers that prevent people from certain groups entering that pipeline in the first place. And actually we need to be targeting those systemic barriers rather than just assuming it's a fait accompli that, if more people come in, then more people will come out and everything will be rosy. I think we need to be much more proactive in the ways that we go about this.
Excellent. I must admit, personally, I was very inspired by Ellen MacArthur and setting up the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the whole of that initiative. And she was, me personally, to be a brilliant role model of what sustainability meant. And she was a completely different face on sustainability at that stage. So maybe we do need a lot more of those really important role models. Sam, a question for you about when do we start talking about hydrogen skills? How do we start the process? Do we need devoted, dedicated courses on hydrogen, or are they part of an engineering course or part of a data science course, for example?
Sure. A few questions in there. I guess I might just make a quick comment on the last question as well.
Sure,
as
please
part
do.
of that,
Yeah,
if that's okay. And I think in what you said about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, I think one way of having more women and young people involved in STEM and technical subjects, in things that are needed for hydrogen, is thinking about that benefit, the way that is going to help change the world, help clean the world, that's going to bring that kind of esteem into this sector, into those courses that maybe hasn't been there. It hasn't been seen as a path that's really going to be beneficial for communities. When do we start doing that? All the time. I don't know if anyone has seen the new gallery at the Science Museum, sponsored by David Sainsbury. That does a lot of this sort of thing of focusing on technicians, on those technician careers kind of from early ages. And there's been lots of problems around careers, training and work and so on. But I know that there is a lot of work that colleagues are doing, and I'm sure Sean will want to talk about all that the college are doing. And in terms of your final question, in terms of the courses that we need, I think going back to lots of comments that were made this morning, we need to innovate in education, as is happening in business, as is happening in industry. So we here are, representing awarding bodies, colleges, universities, but we need training partners, we need all sorts of organisations. And so it's not just about the universities, as good a job and as important as the work is that you're doing, and colleges, but it is the work all across the piece that's going to be required to make the big changes that are needed towards this area.
Thank you very much. Same question, Sean. When should we start? What should we be doing? Are we starting early enough?
That's a good question, really, and I'll just pick up on the point around, getting females into the sector, really. I think you can look at organisations like WISE, Women in Science and Engineering, but also if you look at the things like the Skills Show that is run across the country, and we were fortunate enough to host the Skills Show this year at the college. We saw a great number of students coming in from local schools to actually look at the different technologies, to experience it and make their decisions around their career paths as well. So that opens their eyes up to what is possible for them to join. When you start to look at hydrogen and where we are on that journey, I think we have to look at the whole piece that sits around hydrogen, not just hydrogen as a sole source. We need to look at the associated industries, the supply chains, in terms of looking at from the design side of things through to the manufacture, the actual installation, the maintenance, and then going through to the end. And I know we don't want to talk about the end side of it, but the recycling side of it, the decommissioning side of it, and how do we cover those skill sets? So it's looking at those training programs that support that industry and look at those associated to it, along the lines of, well, it's not going to be a solely driven course. It could be part of how do we equip our plumbing engineers for the future? How do we equip them? How do we look at our motor vehicle engineers and technicians to understand what's needed around hydrogen? And it's looking at upskilling, also reskilling, but then looking at the future people coming through into industry as well.
Thank you. Oliver, a question around developing new courses and new programmes. I'm relatively new to the university. I'm surprised how long that takes to can you just explain a little bit about what it might take to develop these new courses and how long that process is? Because it's not something we can do immediately, is it?
No, that's right, yeah. And I think there does need to be a big acceleration in the time it takes to develop programs of training, because the need is becoming very urgent.
Yeah.
And I think that's clear. We've talked a lot about scale up today. And just to quantify that a bit, we need something like an 8,000-fold increase in electrolyser manufacturing capacity between now and 2050 in order to meet demand. And an annual growth rate of about 130% in installed electrolyser capacity to meet that demand as well. And that's entirely unprecedented rate of growth for technology in peacetime, aside from COVID-19 vaccines. So only COVID-19 vaccines have been developed at a rate faster than that throughout history. So that gives you a sense of the scale of the task in terms of the rate at which the technology needs to scale, and then of course we need the people, we need the engineers available to be able to deliver those technologies as well. So yeah, absolutely, we need to be much faster than we are at the moment. It typically takes a matter of years to develop these courses at the moment, and that needs to become months or even weeks. And the only way we can do that is by engaging effectively with industry to understand the skills needs of industry and really make sure that the courses are well tailored to meet those needs. And then providing training in the right forms, so be it form of apprenticeships or internships, working with industry to do some of that teaching delivery as well, so that some of the teaching activities happen in an industrial context, just to make sure they're relevant to the job. People always learn faster if they sort of learn on the job and they're doing whilst they're learning. So yeah, taking that kind of approach, I think, can hopefully speed up both the development and the delivery of these talk programs.
And Carl, how fast are you able to move? You're used to being adaptive and responsive. Do you feel the need to do that now for this subject? Obviously, you're doing it. Would you like to do more?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've got a green skills paper. So over there on the CV stand, there's some little NOCN cards, and on the back there's a QR code. So if you can go and tap that QR code and just look at the gaps in the skills that we need. And I think manufacturers, employers, the whole supply chain need to get involved. We need to talk to everybody, and we need to get the right people around the right tables to develop the qualifications quickly and efficiently, because at the minute all the qualifications lock the development and speed of technology.
Right, okay, I think we're hearing a lot about we know what to do and we know what to think to do, but we could do it quicker. Yes, sorry, Sam, and then we'll come to James.
Thank you. Yeah, just really wanted to come in on that point in terms of the reforms that have been happening, right from kind of level 2 all the way up to kind of level 7, with new things like degree apprenticeships that are coming in. But also wanted to touch on something called T-levels. I'd really love to see a show of hands of anyone here who's heard of T-levels in the audience. Okay, so we've maybe got just under half or so. There's been kind of 5 years that have gone into the development of T-levels. That's intended to be the technical gold star version of an A-level, so that we have a whole new generation, going back a bit again to the careers piece, who are seeing that there are good careers happening in the technical area that they can go into. And also I wanted to raise this point in terms of how quickly we can move, because the Institute for Technical Education are doing a lot of work in listening to employees and doing those changes so they can work with people like the NOCN group. And so the occupational standards are the same for the T-level, for the apprenticeships, for the higher technical qualification, and they need employers to get involved in those things so you can do those changes. So I think just a plea, if there's anyone here who's thinking, what are education doing, how can we help, get involved in those employer panels and those new qualifications.
James.
Yeah, just a very sort of quick follow-up point to Ollie's point. I think by 2050 can seem a bit distant. We need an 8,000-fold increase in electrolyzer capacity in about 9,300 days. That's the scale of where we are with. It's about 9,838 days till 2050. So that's the rate at which we have to move, not the rate at which we sort of should be aiming to move. It's what we legally have to move to.
Okay. Sean, SMEs are really important, as we know, within this region in particular, and certainly they are in Kent and Essex. And who should be pushing should the big guys be pushing the skills agenda, or the SMEs? How do we cope to SMEs' needs, I think, is a concern we certainly have within our region. We know that SMEs need to get engaged in this skills agenda. They haven't necessarily got the resources. Is there something to help the SME community in particular?
It's a good point, because 95% of our business community is SMEs. And we talk about the big organisations around the region itself, but SMEs are the lifeblood of the region itself. And we do need to consider how we support them. Those SMEs have a different size of workforce and their availability to come out and talk to us about upskilling and working in terms of the qualifications and design and development. So it's incumbent on us really to gather that intelligence from them collectively and then feed that back into the central powers that are designing and developing the courses. We also collect that information through organisations like the Chamber of Commerce, Federation of Small Businesses, those type of organisations, CIB and CBI and things like that. So we utilise those bodies as well to help us gather the information that we need.
And a question for Oliver, should we be using augmented reality, virtual reality, digital twins, simulation to get people excited about the hydrogen training agenda and getting them using digital technologies as part of their training?
Sure, yeah, why not? I think there's a place for all of those different, tools and techniques. I think that there is no substitute though for direct hands-on practical experience. And I think that's where there's a gap in the UK at the moment, that we don't really have many facilities where you can actually go, get hands-on with pipe work, do a bit of plumbing, a bit of electrical integration and make an electrolyser work, for instance. There aren't many places you can go to do that type, or undertake that type of activity at the moment. And that's why facilities like this and our lab at Coventry and others around the country are going to be important in delivering that type of training, getting those practical skills into the workforce. There's no substitute for practical activity, but of course there's room for all kinds of different teaching tools.
James, just a quick question. Are we competing sufficiently with our international colleagues to bring the brains into Britain to develop the new products and ideas here at our universities, or are they going elsewhere?
So that's a tricky question to answer, because in all honesty, over the last number of years, that's changed slightly. Yeah. It's now extremely difficult to get PhD students and to get postdoctoral researchers working in universities, just because of what's gone on over the last couple of years, and certainly COVID hasn't helped that as well. Yeah. But I think what we do have is we have brilliant resources within the universities to be able to attract people. So while we're currently sort of in the midst of a bit of a challenging situation in terms of getting people in, we have the facilities and we have the capabilities so that when people arrive or when people come up through the university systems, they're really in a good place. And I think one of the key things that we've heard from the panel is that as universities and as educators, we really need input from industry. Yeah. And I think that's where the UK university space is particularly good. I think the sort of collaboration across university research and industrial research and the kind of the grey area, the valley of death, as was mentioned earlier, is actually serviced quite well in the university sector, and is I think something that I hope continues as we move forward.
Any more thoughts from the panel before we open it out to the floor? Anything people have said or we've missed in the conversation you feel so far?
I think for me, really, the key thing for us in terms of the success and driving this forward, and it's been mentioned several times this morning, is collaboration. No one organisation can achieve this on their own. We have to collaborate. From an education perspective, we have to work collectively with the industry bodies, we have to work with the awarding bodies and also partners as well. So it is a collective drive and determination to achieve this. And it was picked up earlier this morning, we can't by 2030 be developing a strategy. We have to be there at net zero by 2030. Yeah. And we do need to run just to stand still now.
Okay, good. Can I open it up to the floor for questions, please? We've got a lady here over, I think we should go over to the left first and then to the right, if we may. So over here on the left, please.
I'm Sarah Murray, Industrial Growth Board. I also live in London. So I've kind of got a suggestion and a plug as well. So just two areas. In relation to careers, it was great to hear you pushing and suggesting that there's more awareness of this sector being given to schools. So we run a careers programme across almost all the schools, including SENE schools in North East and South East London. We're always looking for enterprise advisors from new sectors to come in and talk about these opportunities. My suggestion is make it really relevant. Talk about the jobs that are there today. Sometimes hydrogen is talked about something in the future. And I'm just a very good person. If you're 13, 14 and thinking about choices that you need to make for your GCSEs, you need to think about what's available in the next 2 or 3 years. So just try to do that. And we would love to get anybody involved from this room today and the network. The second point is again about this point about getting business involved in setting the agenda. And the latest thing in the education agenda right now is what we're calling the local skills improvement partnerships. So Business London, leading across London to shape that agenda. We've got lots of people here who are going to be involved in that conversation. We want to hear from employers what you need in terms of that skill set, whether it is, as you were saying, technical skills and those hands-on skills, but also the softer skills and digital skills and how that whole mix is going to be relevant for this agenda. So we'd love to help, we'd love to hear from you, and in the next 12 months we'll have you around the table shaping the curriculum for those young people in the future. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, of course.
Can you hear me? Yeah, so just by show of hands, I'm going to ask a question. So I talked earlier a little bit around a commitment charter for tier 1 contractors and large hire companies signing up to a charter that's seen them introduce low carbon plant, low emission plant by 2030. So if I ask the same question in this room today, who in this room would be willing, as part of their CPD, to go in and talk to school children about the possibilities of careers and the green technology? By show of hands, who would want to do that? So that's a really...
It's a good start. It's a good start.
And we need to harness that.
Absolutely.
And take that on board and see what we can do.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I just want, gentleman here from university. I just wanted to say, actually, in the universities, we're terrible at teaching even our own students, and finally we're getting academics and colleagues to use things like blogs. So a 5-minute blog to talk about something that people can read at their leisure, not necessarily a full script. So we need to use new techniques to communicate with these new communities and in the social media, I think, a lot more than we do. Yeah, okay, good question there.
Yes, thank you. I'm Sigal Das, a lecturer in energy management. I asked a question earlier this morning in the first panel discussion, and I'm going to ask it again, but it's interesting that at the moment in CU London, in Dagenham and Greenwich campuses, we are the only programme at the bachelor's level in the entire UK that offer energy management as a non-technical subject. And picking up the point you just mentioned, I do a lot of schools outreach as part of my role to children as young as year 8, year 9, introducing them to the way that, and it's not an understatement to say that there's actually a real opportunity to save the future of the planet, that they will inherit, but as earlier was said, it's happening, it needs to happen right now, as Oliver mentioned, the capacity for on the technology side, and yet there are lots of roles. And my question is, why is it that CU London had the only energy management programme in the country, and which does include hydrogen now in the curriculum, of course, as a result of this event and the interactions that it's created. Why does the panel think that is?
I can give a personal reflection from Kent, and this happened last week. We had a discussion about creating a new master's programme in sustainable engineering, including hydrogen. I was told that it wouldn't start until September 2024 at the earliest, just to get it through the process and through the internal processes within the university. As a non-academic and a non-university person, that kind of shocked me. If you want to get a new product to market, 3 to 6 months maybe. Yeah. James, I suspect you might have a similar experience.
Yeah, I mean, I can completely agree with you in terms of that. We're actually launching a new master's program in Stratford next year based around advanced propulsion. So that's going to be both hydrogen and battery-powered electric vehicles as the primary mode of delivering an education at a master's level. But I think, and that took 3 years, probably, maybe 4 years to get over the line, just with the internal wranglings and stuff like that. Now, admittedly, they've built a shiny new building in the interim, so that's been a positive from it. But I think one thing to bear in mind is that academia, certainly at the university level, has traditionally been quite siloed and has had these sort of quite defined areas. So you have chemical engineering, and chemical engineering is flow through a pipe and distillation and flow through a packed bed, and mechanical engineering is designing designing motors and engines. Increasingly, I'm seeing that move away from that sort of model. So our new program at UCL East is designed with chemical engineering, mechanical engineering and electrical engineering all coming together under the same building. And the real advantage we have there is that I think increasingly what we're going to need over the next 10 years is, as we see hydrogen vehicles and hydrogen applications increasingly come to market, is we don't need someone who knows how to do distillation who then passes it over to someone else who knows how to do something else. We need someone who has the core scientific understanding to be able to adapt to the different market. And I think that one of the big strengths that the UK has is there's an extremely strong electrochemical underpinning in the UK. There's some of the best scientists in the world are at universities in the UK, and that core electrochemistry knowledge is as applicable to fuel cells as it is to batteries. But what that will need us to do, and it's probably a bigger strategy piece than this, is we need to stop this 10-year cycle of we're doing batteries now, and then we get to 10 years later and we turn off batteries and we turn back on fuel cells, where you've lost all that retained knowledge and the institutional knowledge that you have through PhD students, postdocs, master students, and you start from scratch. We need to say we're doing electrochemistry now, or we're doing electrochemical engineering now, and that's the approach that we take going forward. And I think that would be beneficial.
Any other views on that? I think we should widely agree with that, don't we, really?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think I'd add that there are, when we're thinking about the sort of innovation that's needed, it's absolutely right to be thinking about universities and the work universities are doing, but often we think just kind of degree, master's, PhD. There's lots of other things and innovative things that universities are doing in partnership with employers, in partnership with colleges. There's institutes of technology which are kicking off. And I think if we think about things like skills boot camps, which are shorter ways of retraining the UK workforce, and the lifelong loan entitlement that's going to come into place in 2025, then I think you've got those incentives for universities, colleges, training providers to be innovating and thinking about how we can take more of a modular approach to training people more quickly and not having those long structural waits before you can get a new big whole program to market.
Perhaps we should share modules, between universities. That'd be a novel idea, wouldn't it? That we don't reinvent a module. We say, okay, we'll put that on our particular course. You take our business model and put it on your course, and we can get market much more quickly. That would be innovative, wouldn't it? Any gentleman there behind? Sorry, you're slightly behind the pillar, but yeah, we've got to you.
As Hodges, I'm studying sustainability in Central Technology in the web at the moment. You mentioned the timescales involved both in terms of the climate perspective, but also in terms of the education systems. What can be done to refocus those that are already in the workplace and come through all of these training facilities that you described?
Good, very, very good point. Retraining existing people. How are we going to do that?
Yeah, so we're talking about upskilling existing workforces. And again, it's the supply, the demand. The employers know exactly what they need. We're finding out a year too late that there's a skills shortage in a certain area and then going and developing qualifications that fit that skills gap. So we need to find that information out earlier, be more proactive and develop the qualifications early. Whether that be a 3-hour bite-sized course, like I mentioned, the eco-operator earlier, just one 3-hour course that had an 11% saving on fuel on one side. That's massive, that's powerful. And you integrate that through all the sectors that we work across, manufacturing, engineering, the supply chain, transportation, everything. It's huge, it's humongous, and the only thing stopping us are us and employers and federations and associations coming together and defining what good looks like for the future, and let's do it fast.
And
just to add to that, really, I think the biggest challenge as a college we have is getting the skilled people to come in and do the delivery for us. Because as you're fighting to get them into industry, we're equally looking at those same people to do that teaching for us. So I think the only way we can overcome that is to collaborate between partners, collaborate with universities, other colleges, and utilise the technology to deliver this training. Because that way I think we can actually then deliver much more cohesive and collective sort of delivery out to our marketplace itself and get that training to in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've highlighted in the... Can you hear me? Yeah, one of the things that we've highlighted in the skills paper is exactly that, Sean. It's college lecturers, college tutors that you know, are not on the greatest of money, are they? They're not paid the same as somebody working in the sector, in industry. And those people in sector and in industry are potentially earning 50, 60, 70,000 pounds a year, and they have the knowledge and skills to pass on. And it's about that commitment again, and joining up forces with employers. As I asked, you know, before, who would go into a school and give a pledge that they'd give one day a year or something like that to careers advice. It's that transitioning that thought process and replicating that and getting the right people delivering the right stuff.
Okay, so perhaps just one more question, then I'll sum up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi, my name is Richard Love. I'm working with the Boston Group currently. We've found a niche, we found that need retired from education. And have been doing some consulting, working with LCL awards. So, what Quantum have come up with is the gap with the Level 2 program. So we are actually writing a Level 2 program, which will be available for the colleges in the new year. So hopefully we'll start the January term that's going forward. My main question is how do we bridge the gap between the standard colleges and the private trainers who are delivering short courses, you know, I've taken some of the LCL award stuff, and really people coming in need a broader understanding. So how do we fill that niche? My big passion is retraining, and I think that's one of the things we need to get better at in this country. So how does the panel think that we take people and actually allow them to retrain? Where does that sit?
Yeah, happy to pick that up. So retraining, obviously you need to look at the workforce and target that to the individuals. So if they're unemployed, for instance, we look at how do we put that training on to suit their needs around what they can and can't do in terms of their job seekers allowance and so on. But when you start to think about those that are in low paid jobs, for instance, we obviously don't want to take them out of the workplace to train them. So we have to look at when that training takes place to actually support that. So do we run it as an evening class? Do we run it as a bite-sized weekend sort of training program? But for us as a college, it's about being flexible, agile, and being sort of responsive to those individual needs and putting that training on. Is it in person, face-to-face? Is it a collective sort of training program that we run through their organisation, or do we do it online? You know, there's many ways of covering it, and it's how do we get that message out to the audience really and cater for that. We do it in a number of ways ourselves, you know, through social media, through friends, family, through networking groups, all sorts of things, but we still don't reach that audience fully, you know, and it's constantly pushing that message out. And just touching up on an earlier point that was raised earlier was around how do we change the perception of females coming into the sector. And one point we missed was parents. Parents play a critical part in their children's decisions for the future. And we need to make sure that parents are aware of what is now available and what the industry now is offering for them. You know, that way I think we can start to change that culture a bit more as well.
Thank you. Right, so just to sum up, we should start in schools, we should get the parents involved, we need the role models, especially those role models that represent what we want to be, not necessarily what we are. We need to think about how quickly we can develop and train and adapt courses, start that process now. We need to get the talent right the way through the universities and bring the best to Britain. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. We know our education and university system is the best in the world, and we should be the best in the world here, really. And thank you very much to the panel, and thank you for your time and involvement. Thank you.